Hello. So, I was reading the other day the paperwork that I was given in my writing class that explains to us what the teacher wants us to do. And I would recommend that anyone going to school does the same and does not avoid reading the course description material until the last week of school. It's always good to know what they want you to do. So I found some interesting things that are being said in this paper that is titled up here, Incorporating Other Texts into Your Writing, Guidelines for Summary, Paraphrase, and Quotation. And the wording that I'm going to be talking about is in this paragraph, which is headed up here with the words, Using Sources to Establish Your Credibility. So, now the paragraph. As noted in Chapter 10, effective writers appeal to their audience by demonstrating that they are reasonable, ethical, and empathetic. When you present relevant evidence from reliable sources, you demonstrate that you are reasonable. When you take care to put other writers' ideas into your own words, and indicate the sources of all ideas and quotations that are not your own, and that are not common knowledge, you demonstrate that you are ethical, and therefore trustworthy. So those last two sentences is what specifically I'm going to be talking about. And now I'm going to read that first of the last two sentences again. When you take care to put other writers' ideas into your... Oops, not that sentence, the one before it. When you present relevant evidence from reliable sources, you demonstrate that you are reasonable. So, what's being said here is that when you accept the authority of this system, you demonstrate that you are reasonable, which seems to mean that in this context, reasonable seems to be defined as that you can be reasoned with by the mentality that is accepted by the authorities of this system. But if you look at the words according to what they're defined as in the dictionary, then this sentence is not true, because when you present evidence from certain sources, what they're calling reliable sources, and that word reliable is like really like sketchy. Like, what can I rely on any academic writer who has authority to be doing? Because they're wrong quite a bit, they're not always right. Just because they have authority doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. And if you take a look at the way this world is functioning, in regards to like how the economic systems are failing and how the social systems are failing, and this is having the at-large effect of causing billions of people to live in poverty, we can see that authority isn't really what it's cracked up to be. So they're defining reason as a form of faith, and I would define reason as the act of taking an idea and then taking it apart into smaller parts that I can understand, and then looking at each part and testing it out and seeing, does this work? Does this function? And I don't think anyone's going to argue with that definition of the word reason. But to define reason as faith in authority, especially the authorities of this system, that's like a little bit shaky. Well, more than a little bit, but that's quite shaky. So the next sentence. When you take care to put other writers' ideas into your own words and indicate the sources of all ideas and quotations that are not your own and that are not common knowledge, you demonstrate that you are ethical and therefore trustworthy. Trustworthy because you can be trusted to not infringe on the control over ideas and thusly status and money that is enjoyed by the elite of the academic system. Now, this mentality you can also find in the syllabus, the course description that I was talking about. At the very back, they have a paragraph about student conduct, which is how you're supposed to behave in class. And let me just give you a quick list of the demands is disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. Disruptive behaviors include inappropriate talking, arriving late or leaving early, sleeping, doing work for other classes, using cell phones, iPod, Blackberries, Palm Pilots, etc. So, mainly the student conduct says don't get in the way of the system. It's not about student and student thing. It's not like, the basic stuff. Don't hit your fellow peers. Or perhaps even more relevantly, don't steal your peers' money. Or how about don't be psychologically or emotionally abusive to your peers. There is a sentence in here that says disrespectful behavior. So the consideration is not really being given to the students. It's about the system. Now there's a buzzword in all of these writing classes, course descriptions, that's called plagiarism. And this word has the aura of a very serious crime, and it's treated like a very serious crime. And this is what plagiarism is. Oh, I sure do not enjoy school. I don't want to do my homework, so I'm going to copy, paste somebody else's writing, and then print it out and turn it in like I wrote it. And this is interpreted by the system. And I guess if we're going to put a face on the system, we can look at it as the higher-ups in the system, those who control and probably thusly benefit from the system. They interpret this action, which is obviously not an intent to steal anything, but they interpret it as an encroachment on their control of money and status, which is quite egotistical, selfish, jealous. And so since I have been like 12, the students have been routinely and systematically threatened and intimidated. Don't you dare plagiarize. Or, as they say in some very intimidating, bold lettering, we will fail you from the course. So they'll really fuck you if you plagiarize, which I think should be better described as not doing your paper. Like if a student turns in something they didn't write and they didn't do the assignment, an appropriate response would be to not give them credit for something they didn't do. Oh, you didn't write this, take it home, do the assignment, bring it back, and you'll get a 5% deduction for turning it in late. Something like that would be appropriate, but to ban them from the course as a way to intimidate them and scare them because people are afraid of losing control of money and status, that really kind of brings out the nature of the authorities that I mentioned earlier. So in that sentence, which says, when you take care to put other writers' ideas into your own words and indicate the sources of all ideas in quotations that are not your own and that are not common knowledge, you demonstrate that you are ethical and therefore trustworthy, is saying that you can't be trusted unless you have been sufficiently conditioned to fear the laws of money as far as they go in this academic system. So those 2 points, faith and money, it's like really fucking interesting because after like taking apart the wording, I noticed that it was like so much like Christianity. That whole thing with where it's like, oh, that man is a faithful, God-fearing Christian. Faith and fear. So, astonishingly, even though we live in like this secular environment where people look back on the belief systems of Christianity as like outdated and obsolete and kind of insane in a way, the delusional ravings of ignorant, uneducated, prehistoric humans almost. That stuff is still going on. It still works that way, but in the current system, it's like it's been given this new cloak of authority and credibility. But that point, credibility, again, is the same point of reliable sources. You can't trust that. Obviously, they're just there for their money and they're interested in their status, so you can't trust them with yourself. They're not reliable sources. And that's like brings up just how important and critical and crucial the principle of equality is, because there's no time to go through this kind of ingenious deception point by point. There's like no way to do that. But equality makes all of this completely irrelevant. So because it doesn't, if people value equality, then none of this shit matters. It's like in The Wizard of Oz with the man behind the curtain. It probably took the people who set up the stage on which the cast will be acting. It probably took them like an hour, 30 minutes maybe, to assemble that metal construction on which that curtain was hung, but it only takes like 3 seconds to pull it aside. That's like the same way that equality works, because everyone can see equality and understand what equality is and what a dignified life is. And if that standard's not being met, then it doesn't matter how clever or ingenious this deception and this cloak of authority is, because people will see, no, your authority is invalid because you're not standing for equality.